She goes,
Thank you. Welcome everyone from Zoom world to Facebook Live world to YouTube. You are attending the Black American Political Association of California, San Diego chapter, and we welcome you to our Zoom conversation around the recall and the special election. We have a panel that consists of great leaders who are experts in their own right on this particular subject and in their fields of discipline, and we're honored to have them all here today. We want you to become well-informed voters so that when you complete your ballot, you have all the information that you need in order to make a well-informed decision. We're going to start right away because we have a lot of awesome individuals on our call today. First of all, we want to ensure that everyone who's on Zoom, please mute yourself until you're called on, please. So we will not have many interruptions. So everyone mute yourself. When I introduce you, then you can unmute, particularly. We're going to start out, as we do with all of our BAPAC general membership meetings, with a word of prayer from our own board member and director of membership and our minister, Gregory Mitchell.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Thank you, dear Father, for this day. And dear Lord, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be found acceptable in your sight. Dear Lord, you're my rock, my strength, and my redeemer. Dear Lord, let us all understand that no one goes before the Father but through the Son. Dear Lord, allow us to understand that we're in this meeting, that we can sing together, but we can't talk together, dear Lord. So let us have mindful respect of someone that's talking. We're here to form somewhat of a coalition in order to make things right in our community and in our state. And that we're not here to leave with a bad taste in our mouth. We're here to be all on one accord in the beginning and to be on one accord in the end. Thank you for your time. In your precious Son, Jesus' name, I pray with forgiveness of sin. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Greg.
Amen.
Appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Amen. Today, we are actually waiting a little bit on our moderator, Mitch Mitchell, who is in the air. He's landing in the next few minutes. And so today we're going to take the opportunity and liberty to allow everyone who is on the Zoom call today to introduce themselves. And so let me just start, and that's everyone, including our panelists, so we can all have an introduction. Let me introduce myself. I'm Ellen Nash. I'm the chair of the San Diego chapter of BAPAC, and I'm a lifetime resident here in San Diego, and so happy that you're all here. Thank you. With Regina Evans.
Good morning, Regina Evans. I'm Chief of Staff to Board of Equalization member Malia Cohen, member of BAPAC, and very excited to be part of this discussion.
Abina.
Okay. Good morning, afternoon. Abina Briscoe Stevenson, board member of BAPAC, member of NARAB, California Women's Black Collective, and many other organizations within the city of San Diego and outside of, in the state.
Elise Pipkin-Allen.
Oh, hello, everybody. I'm Elise Pipkin-Allen. I am one of the vice chairs of BAPAC. Although I was born in Mississippi, I've been in San Diego for the majority of my life. And I feel like I'm a San Diego resident who believes in democracy.
Thank you. Jay McErney.
Hi, I'm Jerry McInerney, and I'm a Voice of San Diego subscriber, and that's how I heard about this meeting, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Aramy Glass-Blake.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Aramy Glass-Blake. I am the director of Generation Justice, and a member of BAPAC and so many other organizations, also the chair of the Chiefs Advisory Board and a delegate of the 79th District.
Thank you. Amy Morris.
Good afternoon. My name is Amy Morris. I'm a longtime San Diego resident. I also heard about this forum on Voice of San Diego, and I'm interested in the topic, so I'm sitting in for as long as I can today. Thanks.
Thank you. Craig Milgram.
Good afternoon, everybody. I apologize, my camera is not working, so you'll have to see my beautiful portrait photograph there. I sit on the board of the San Diego Community College District. I got this link through my very wonderful neighbor, Debbie Washington. We've been trying to connect so that I can come and hear from you, hear from the folks at BAPAC. So here I am. I got this. I'll sit in for as long as I can, and then hopefully in the future we can get to know each other more. So thank you for allowing me to say a few words, and I look forward to getting to know all of you better.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Dante Wyatt.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dante Wyatt. I am a member of BAPAC. I probably need to renew because I'm not sure if I paid since COVID, but also on the NAACP board and the Early Beginnings board. I'm just here to learn.
Welcome. Let's see. Dr. G.
Hello, Ellen. Bob Gillespie, cardiologist here. How are you?
Great.
I'm glad to see you, and I'm happy to be here. I've been here in San Diego for almost 30 years. I'm a cardiologist here. I'm the lead task force trusted messenger for San Diego Equity Task Force of San Diego, and been involved in the community with vaccines and vaccine hesitancy and trying to educate our folks in the community on getting vaccinated. And I'm here to discuss any medical issues that may be relevant at the time of this discussion. Looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Faith Whitehurst Miller. Faith. We'll come back to her. Naomi B.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Naomi B, and I'm a resident of San Diego. And I, like the other gentleman said, I need to join BAPAC. But I got this information about today's discussion through the National Council of Negro Women's of San Diego chapter. And I'm looking forward to hearing all about this recall.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Wanda Rogers.
I am a BWOW alumni. I am a small business owner. I'm a progressive DEM member, Martin Luther King Club. Okay. And recently, I am the 2021 winner of the San Diego Chamber Woman Minority Owned Small Business. Wow. And District 79, I received an award for community outreach member. So
congratulations. Congratulations. I see Reese Jarrett is here. Reese, could you introduce yourself, sir?
Oh. Hello, this is Reese Jarrett. I'm a native San Diegan, real estate developer in San Diego. Good morning or good afternoon.
Ellen, out and about, and just wanted to listen in. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Did I miss anyone?
Yes, you missed Michael Murray.
Yes, we're going to introduce the panelists in a few minutes.
Roger that.
Okay. I thought I saw Chevelle. Maybe she left. Or maybe she's coming back. Okay. Thank you for all being here. We're waiting on Mitch Mitchell. He's just coming in now. He's on. Good morning, Mr. Mitchell.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, good. You arrived safely?
I am safely on the ground. I'm at baggage claim. I appreciate your patience. I was supposed to arrive about 16 hours ago, so I was going to be all settled and ready to host them from my hotel room. But instead, it was a travel day that you will never, ever, ever, you would never, ever want to experience. So, but I'm here. I'm here. So.
Thank you. Well, we've had our welcome. Everyone has introduced themselves. We've had prayer, and now we want to turn it over to you to moderate the rest of the program here. And that's the order would be Scott Lewis is going first, and then Denise Green is going after that, and then all the other panelists will come in after that.
That is perfect. So I'm always interested in hearing what Scott Lewis has to say on a Saturday morning. So take it away, Scott.
Hi, thanks, Mitch, and thanks, Ellen and BAPAC for letting me be a part of this. So all I am tasked with is providing some facts and context around how we got to this point, and hopefully some nuggets you'll entertain your friends with tonight's party. So we'll get to that. So let's just start with this. California is just one of, I'm sorry, I'm the CEO and editor. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I'm the CEO and editor-in-chief at Voice of San Diego. We do investigative and explanatory reporting, and I particularly recommend our politics report. Comes out every Saturday, and today's is chock full of some interesting stuff. Go to voicesandiego.org to check that out. Okay, so let's jump right in. California is just one of 20 states that have a recall process like this. Others, like New York, for example, where the governor is in a little bit of trouble, do not. They have a impeachment process. But it is much easier to do here in California than in most other states. Most other states require 25% or at least 15%. In Wisconsin, you might remember a recall election in 2012, which failed against Governor Scott Walker there. They needed to collect signatures from 25% of the number of voters in the previous governor's election in order to force a recall vote in Wisconsin. Here, it is half that. It's 12% to get a recall onto the ballot. There are a couple of states that have even a lower threshold than that. Virginia has a 10% and Montana has a 10% threshold as well. So again, it's based on the number of votes in the previous governor's election. They needed to collect 12% of that number in signatures. This is actually the result of the 6th attempt at recalling Gavin Newsom since he was elected in 2018. This is the 6th attempt that came, and it finally succeeded. Now, it succeeded in part because there's 160 days to get signatures collected to get to that 12% threshold. A judge in this case allowed them 4 more months to collect signatures because of the pandemic. And that was a very key decision at a key moment when some of the scandals or controversies about Governor Gavin Newsom started to really heat up. They also got 4 more months to collect signatures. All that combined into, there is now a recall. It will occur on September 14th It'll cost about $215 million to execute, and ballots, we're going to hear about them specifically, are already in people's hands and being sent back. So just some background too. Of course, there was a successful recall election in 2003. More people voted in that recall than voted for governor just the year before that. Governor Gray Davis, you might remember, was the governor. There was a much different situation with electricity, with the state budget, with different tax and fee measures that had been going, and there was a lot of discontent. Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, of course, ended up winning that recall election, about 48% of the vote. Now, there was a really interesting commentary in the Hill newspaper or online. Joshua Spivak wrote that he had analyzed 110 recall elections that have taken place in California over the last 10 years, and 86 of them, a full 78%, saw the official removed. So, it generally holds that if you're running for a re-election as an incumbent, you are very likely to win re-election. The opposite is true if you are forced to a recall. So I know that we have somebody's going to talk more specifically about how the voting process is going to look from the Secretary of State's office, but remember, there's just a yes or no question about, do you want to recall the governor? And then the second question is, should he be recalled? Who do you choose out of that? You do not have to make a choice on that second one if you would like not to, but you can, and no matter how you vote on that first question. There's a couple of interesting things to consider here. There will still be a governor's election next year. In fact, the primary for that is 9-10 months away. And so no matter what happens, if Larry Elder or Kevin Faulconer is put into the governor's office, that person will have to face re-election, and if same goes for Gavin Newsom, that this would knock him out of most of his last year in office, but there will be election no matter what. And there is a interesting legal argument sort of bubbling up right now. The LA Times had an op-ed about it yesterday. There's some lawsuits regarding it. There is some concern that it's unconstitutional for somebody to be elected in a situation like this, getting far fewer votes than Gavin Newsom will get. So there's a chance, what if he gets a no vote at 48%, as in no, we would like to keep him at like 48%, and then somebody could end up becoming governor with as little as 15% or 18% of the vote. Is that a representative democracy? Is that constitutional? That might be an issue that I think the proponents of that theory would want to see dealt with before the vote, because courts are very reluctant to change the votes afterward. Some perspective on that second question, and I'll leave it at that, is there's a lot of people wondering about that. Again, you do not have to make a choice on the second question if you would like not to. The Democrats made the decision, along with the governor, to put most of their chips on him, and they're basically saying it's him versus the rest of the field. A vote for him is a no vote, and then a vote for the rest of the field is a yes on that, and then anybody else. So there's been some backlash to that. Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez wrote the other day on Twitter that my stepfather was not thrilled when he just asked me how he should vote on that second question, and I told him to leave it blank. I have to be honest, quote, no on recall, yes on Bustamante seems far more rational to me. What she's referring to is Cruz Bustamante, former lieutenant governor who ran in 2003 in that recall, wanted to provide Democrats an alternative, and it didn't work. Obviously, Schwarzenegger won that. But I think a lot of people are struggling with what the central question for you all is how to handle these two questions. Finally, the LA Times wrote the other day that they would like to see voters say no on the recall and to, quote, hold their noses and select former San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer the least bad option on the list of replacements on the second question. And they said, quote, lodging a protest vote by writing in, say, Tom Hanks or SpongeBob SquarePants might feel good in the moment, but it's as much a cop-out as not voting for a replacement at all. So there's a lot of different debates about that second question. I look forward to hearing what you all have to say and how that's going to work out. But those are some context and facts that I just wanted to set the discussion up. And again, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this process. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Scott. As always, your research and your analysis is excellent. I know that you love this stuff, Scott. You know, even though the Newsom campaign is fretting this a little bit and struggling, you're probably the only guy in California who's really thrilled about just being able to capture all the facts and watch all the happenings. So folks, there you have it. You've heard about the overview of what's about to happen on September 14th. Again, I'm Mitch Mitchell. I want to apologize for my both my attire and my location. I'm traveling back to bring my daughter back to college, and the situation is such that with the hurricane weather blowing in on the East Coast, finding a flight to get into upstate New York was difficult. And but I am here and I'm with you until we finish this. So I want to welcome everybody from Facebook. I think a lot of you are joining us by Facebook Live, and a few people are joining us from iCloud. And I think we actually may have, let me double check here, YouTube audience as well. So that's when Mrs. Nash asks you to show up for something, you show up. And that's why when we were landing, I had to go up to the cockpit for a minute and tell the pilot he needed to hurry and get down on the ground. So with that, I heard that you've all you've heard the introductions of the panelists. You've now heard the overview from Scott Lewis about, oh, you didn't hear the introduction from the panelists? Okay, maybe that's not correct. I apologize then. So let's go now to the panelists. Now that you've heard the overview about the recall election, let's hear from the people today that are going to provide some insight and guidance on this discussion to you. And we will start out with, first of all, with the representative from the Secretary of State's office. I believe that would be the appropriate thing. Let's start out first with Denise Green. And we're going to give everybody 2 minutes to talk about who you are and why you're here.
Hello, my name is Denise Green. I am an Assistant Deputy to the Secretary of State, Strategic Partnership, Business Outreach. I just wanted to give just a quick overview of the Secretary of State's office, which comprises of nearly 500 people. And the Secretary of State's responsibilities include serving as the state's chief election officer, implementing electronic filing and internet disclosures of campaigns and lobbyists' financial information. She maintains business filing comprising of Notary Republic, operating the Safe at Home confidential address programs, maintaining the domestic partnerships and advanced healthcare directive registries, safeguarding the state archives, and serving as the trustee of the California Museum. And I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Wonderful, and you stay within time. I appreciate it. We're going to go in the order of the that is listed on the invite today. And with that, Will Kennedy. I think everybody knows who you are, but you might want to let us all know. 2 minutes.
Sure. Will Rodriguez Kennedy. I am the chair of the San Diego County Democratic Party. I also serve as a member of the Democratic National Committee, and locally and nonpartisanly, I serve on the Civil Service Commission for the County of San Diego. And then I work for the California Board of Equalization as an assistant to one of the members. That's me.
You are LaCharla Wilson. You're up next. Attorney.
All right. Thank you very much. LaCharla Wilson. I'm an attorney here in San Diego in private practice. And then now, I can't believe 32 years. And prior to going to private practice, I spent 24 years in the San Diego Public Defender's Office. I primarily focus on criminal law, a little arbitration. I've done personal injury, labor, and employment. And because I know there are people on this Zoom, I have to mention I am a past president of the NAACP San Diego branch, past president of the Earl McGillin Bar Association, past president of the National Council of Negro Women.
In summary,
and I'm a member of BAPAC. Okay.
And you're a member of BAPAC. Okay, I was going to say, in summary, you have been incredibly busy engaged and involved, and we appreciate that. So thank you very much for that overview. Dennis Dawson. Dennis, you're on mute. Dennis, you're on mute.
Hello, everyone.
Now you're off.
I am an attorney here in San Diego. I'm a graduate of Howard University School of Law. I practiced for 35 years in the California Attorney General's office as the Deputy Attorney General. I'm now in private practice. I am a member of the California Association of Black Lawyers. I am also one of the original founders and past presidents of the Earl B. Gilliam Bar Association. I'm a life member of the NAACP. I'm very concerned about some of the individuals who could possibly be elected as a result of this recall, which is why I agreed to accept Ellen's invitation to serve on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate it. And last but not least, Mike Murray.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Murray. I am a United States Marine Corps combat veteran. I am originally from Brooklyn, New York, but I've been in California for 20 years now. I'm a small business owner working in residential mortgages. And there are just a few issues near and dear to my heart when it comes to this Gavin Newsom recall. And I want to make sure that anybody who is watching is aware of these specific issues. And I'm excited to hear what everybody has to say and to add my input.
Thank you very much, Michael. I appreciate it. Okay, so now with that, we have the introduction of the panel. You've heard the overview of the election that's coming up. I'm going to start out with, I have a few questions that I plan on adding. We are actually adding a panelist. I believe it is Ernique Blake.
Ermique. Hi.
Blake. Hi.
Hello. So I got cut off.
Ermique, I apologize. Ermique Glass Blake. Black. Blake.
Thank you, Mitch. I'm assuming that you guys are doing introductions. I got cut off.
We are doing introductions, so it's your turn now.
Oh, okay. Perfect. So I did a little bit of an introduction earlier, but again, my name is Ermique Glass Blake. I am the director transitioning out for Generation Justice. Also, the chief officer at the Independent Office of Public Safety and the chair for the Chiefs Advisory Board, as well as a longtime member of BAPAC. Thank you for having me here. And I believe the reason why I'm on the panel is to bring a different perspective in regards to how the implementation of the recall is going about from a person that is a little bit more independent. And although I am unfortunately right now a Democrat, kind of looking at it from an independent perspective.
All right, well, okay, perfect. Now we have all the panelists that have now been introduced. Let's get into the discussion. I think one of the things that people are wondering today is why are we indeed having an election? Why is there a recall election? Governor Gavin Newsom is actually scheduled, his term is scheduled to end next year. He would be up for re-election in the primary and the general, and the general being in November. And so a lot of people are asking, we're spending all this money to have a recall election. Why? So the first question for the panelists, and I've allotted a little bit of time for everybody on this one because I think it's important to level set. What is going right and what is going wrong in California? We know that the next question will be more specific, but what is going right and what's going wrong? And we will actually we'll continue to go in order. Will Kennedy, you'll go first, and we'll go back down the line, and we will, and then we'll come back, and then we'll go to the next question. So, Will, what's going right and what's going wrong? You have 3 minutes.
Well, it's a big state, so there's a lot of things going right and wrong. In terms of what's going right, California is leading the nation in terms of, or at least is ahead of the nation in terms of vaccinations, in terms of the economy, in terms of weathering through the COVID-19 pandemic. That being said, there is a lot of people who are concerned about sort of the intransigent, the long-term problems that have affected our state. Housing is still a problem here in California. Cost of living is still a problem here in California. And things like homelessness and access to healthcare are still problems in California. Now, it's important to note that comparatively to Republican states, we are far ahead in almost every objective measure. But because because the recall process is so easy, and you only require 12% of the last electorate in order to get there, we are seeing where a small number of voters are able to put those very reasonable, but in some cases, concerns and use that to fuel the fears of other people and to get to a recall position, or to get to a recall into effect. So California is doing better than most states, but there are enough disenfranchised or discontented Republicans out there to pull off a recall and make us spend $215 or whatever $1 million that we are now.
Thank you, Will. That was a good job. Let's go to the next panelist. I lost my order here, but I do believe it's late Charlotte, Mrs. Wilson. You're next.
Okay, I agree what Mr. Rodriguez said, but I think what's going wrong is there's too much misinformation out there. And although I think everything leads to the pandemic, it wasn't something that the question becomes not where it came from, where it came into the country. Then you have all this information. You got people who believe in vaccinations. You got those who don't. Then you got the masks, the anti-maskers, and then you have the problem with the schools. But most of that is fueled by misinformation, conspiracy, theories, and then people thinking they're individual rights. And it came from what they call them, TFG, the former guy who laid all this, not to trust the media, do not trust science, do not trust the experts. And so the battle is really between the parents and the schools. And that's what's upsetting people. Yeah, people have individual rights, but I think health and the safety of the state and also the rest of the country is important. And so then when you had the businesses shut down and schools were closed, people got angry, and that's really how the country's divided. I mean, there's always a division between race, religion, and politics. But
so true.
We can't say it went wrong. What we can say is, I think that's what's fueling it right now.
Misinformation. Okay, that's a good answer. Dennis Dawson, you're up next.
One of the first things that I think this governor got right was his appointments. I think his appointments are enlightened. I think he right away appointed an African-American attorney as a justice on the California Supreme Court, and that has enormous ramifications for how the court's decisions affect African-Americans. I think his appointment of Dr. Weber as the Secretary of State is going to be a tremendous benefit for our community. I think the problems and the way we got here is that there is the groundswell of disappointed, disillusioned, Trump-like Republicans who are dissatisfied and very angry about California's, I think it's fair to say, rather liberal immigration policy.
Okay. All right.
I think that they are very angry with not having full gun rights that they want to have, and the efforts of the Democratic Party to exercise reasonable gun control. I think that they are incensed that taxes are so high. I think that they are angry that the death penalty has not been executed with any regularity in California. I think that they are concerned about the homeless crisis, but only because they don't want to step over homeless people on the way to their restaurants. I think that they are very angry at the governor for the stay-at-home orders, which I think he properly issued at the very beginning of this pandemic. I think he saved a lot of lives by doing so. But I think you have a lot of people in the business community who were looking only at dollars and could care less whether or not the stay-at-home orders were a reasonable exercise of the governor's duty to promote the public health and safety. I think the resurgence of the pandemic was very, very unfortunate. I think it gathered even more momentum to the people that are behind the recall. I don't think the wildfires helped. I think the drought has worsened the situation. I think, unfortunately, the governor exposed himself to some reasonable charges of hypocrisy when he was filmed at the French restaurant while he was asking everybody else to stay at home.
All right.
So
So
what happened here is that there's been a number of factors that have encouraged people to emphasize the negative, and that is why we got to this recall.
all right. Okay, Mike Murray, we're going to get to you, and then Ms. Glass Blake, and we're going to try and move this along. So we have three more important questions. Mike Murray, go ahead.
All right. So as far as what has gone right under Newsom, I appreciate the expeditious nature that he handled COVID once we realized it was here. San Francisco was the first city to go into quarantine, and moving quickly in these situations is very important. However, to kind of piggyback on what Ms. Wilson said, not enough people have faith in science, and I don't believe that we are handling this based on knowledge and science as much as we are the rhetoric in politics and media. For instance, anytime there's a situation where there's illness or infection, quarantining is done to people who are infected, not to the masses. It's a waste of energy and being pinned up. And in addition to that, with COVID being a hot topic right now, we have to think about the human dynamics element of fear, desperate nature. As a Marine Corps veteran and a person who's been in very desperate situations in other countries, I know that desperate people can be very irrational. And so having so many new gun laws and ammo laws at a time when people should be able to protect themselves the most, I feel like that was counterproductive. Also, the homelessness issue here is a problem, and California has some of the highest poverty levels in the country. As a matter of fact, we have the highest poverty level in the country. However, we have the highest sales state tax, highest property taxes in the nation. I don't think the conversation of how do we get people off the street is the same as how do we keep people from ending up on the street. But so many increased taxes is definitely going to add to that list if we combine that with loss of jobs, loss of unemployment for a lot of people, and then Prop 13, where they're attempting to restructure the taxes, but it has the potential to increase property taxes even more. And we already have the highest in the state of in the country. So I believe that's inside my 3 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. I would next go to Ms. Glass Blake. You are up for the final voice on this question. What's going right? What's going wrong? Why are we here?
I think we're here for so many reasons that everyone already stated. But I think, the elephant in the room is really the conversation on this is BAPAC, right? And so when we're talking about Black folks, we have to really understand that, people are really having to choose between the lesser of two evils. And I think what you're seeing is people really getting to a point where they are tired of having to choose between the two. And I think Gavin Newsom has done a really good job of how he handled the pandemic, despite what people say. But I think the Democratic Party as a whole has really shown where they are a little less racist, and people are having to really evaluate, are we just, choosing certain people based on our party, preference, or are we choosing people because they're the right person for the position? And I think kind of, the leadership within the Democratic parties have been, a huge issue. And so I think when we look at who can potentially be our next governor, we have a mayor who we already had, who did a horrible job in regards to handling homelessness, who did a horrible job in regards to public safety. And so when we really look at it, do we really want to make the same mistakes on a state level that were already made within our city? And as San Diego, and we've been through it, we need to be the advocates on the front line to say, this is not about Democrat, Republican. This is about who can do the job and who has been doing it well. And I believe that Gavin Newsom, I'm not a big, heavy pusher of anybody Democrat, let's go for them, or anyone Republican, let's go for them. I'm a pusher of who can do the job and who can do it well. And I believe, in this job that is so difficult and so hard, he's been able to navigate through that in a efficient way. And so that's where I believe is working and what's not working.
All right, so let me summarize a couple of things before we go to the next question. I mean, obviously, there's anxiety over COVID. There's anxiety over some of the policies that are coming out of the state capital in Sacramento, whether related to guns or taxes, whether related to schools and education, crime. I think what's clear, and I've always said this to Scott Lewis, who opened this up, that there are opinions within each of the communities, and a lot of the opinions will be the same. Everybody wants crime to be lower. Everybody wants to pay less because the cost of living is becoming an overwhelming burden. So right now we are divided over this. The next question is really about COVID. I wanted to say one thing also, that while the taxes are high in California, they're the highest in New Jersey. So if you want to see high taxes or real struggle for cost of living, go to New Jersey, because that's a place where there's a struggle. But let's talk about COVID, because that's really what I think all of you you hit on, is there is this significant divide. And it's not just a divide over the science, whether COVID exists. It's how you handled COVID, how the governor handled COVID. And there were questions about what from the beginning. Was COVID, is it just a common cold? Is it really a problem? There were questions about do you have to mask? There were questions about, do you have to shut businesses down? There was an economic impact during the shutdown. But I think what everybody on this that's listening today has to acknowledge also is, I am glad, and I will say this as the moderator, that I am not in Louisiana or in Florida, where they have some of the highest rates in the world right now. And for those of you who aren't paying close attention, there are large Black populations, large communities of color that are struggling because of the decisions made by the people in the highest ranks of government. And you can't bring someone back from this situation. You either shut it. So I think it's one of those things you have to remember. So with that, let's go to the next question, which is around COVID. The question is, did you think the governor and the governor handled COVID well, from the shutdown to his communication and an explanation? And it's really just that simple, because there are those, and it's not a question of I think that you will find that across the board that it's Republicans and Democrats that were upset. Listen, if I was working and my company shut down and I was not earning a living because we were not open, I would be upset. That's not a Republican or Democrat issue. That's just a finances issue. That's just a kitchen table conversation. So we'll start with that question. How do you think the governor fared as it relates to handling COVID? And first up to answer that question is Mrs. Wilson, then Mr. Dawson, Mr. Murray, and Ms. Glass-Blake, and then back to you, Will Kennedy. And again, I'm going to try and time you guys a little better, because I don't want this. We want to get to the next question, which is about education in schools. So you have 2 minutes on this one. Go ahead, please.
I don't even need that much time. First of all, okay. I'm proud to say I'm fully vaccinated. And, in the beginning, we made jokes about it. Like, I'm not going to take that. I don't want a horn growing out of my head. But I had to wait to do it. There are over 650,000 people did, which I don't think was necessary to happen, maybe in the beginning before we had the vaccination. So I think the governor did the best with what he could have. It should have been the federal government managing this, and left up to the different states. And so maybe it could have been done better. But I tell you what, it could have been worse because you already mentioned, I think, Florida, Louisiana, there's Texas, and all these other states.
Sure.
And I understand with businesses being closed, but you only can complain when you're live. None of the dead people get to complain.
True.
So I think he did the best that he could have, and I don't have any complaints. It was easy for me because I don't have kids in school. And by the way, I'm not a missus, but I'm not looking to be one. But I do want to put that on the record.
Thanks,
And that's all I have to say. You do the best you can. He didn't sign up. He had his agenda. I'm gonna do this while I'm governor. These are my goals. Pandemic came in, and sometimes you have to do the best you can, especially when it's a novel virus and no one still knows. All right, that's it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Mr. Dawson, go ahead. 2 minutes. Dennis?
Okay. I think this is a very, very difficult job that any governor of any state would have to try to manage a pandemic of these proportions. And I think in the course of making decisions, you're always going to disappoint a whole lot of people. On balance, I think that Governor Newsom did the best he could with what he had. I think he correctly emphasized public safety. Unfortunately, the business community was up in arms early, but I think that their view was somewhat more narrow, and it was basically the view from the cash register is different from the view from the COVID-19 emergency ward. And so I think that he had a hard job, but initially when he issued the stay-at-home orders, I fully believe that that was responsible for saving a lot of lives. I think that the campaign to get people vaccinated had a lot of publicity. I think that protected a lot of lives. And I think that unfortunately, many people lost money due to business failures, due to business struggles, due to people getting laid off. But that's part of this pandemic. And I can't imagine any other governor that could have basically actually saved the business community while at the same time protecting lives.
All right, Dennis, thank you very much. Let's go. Mr. Murray, you're up next. Mike Murray.
Oh, sorry about that. I was on mute.
Okay. No
So Governor Newsom obviously has a very high stakes, difficult job, and the decisions that he makes affects a lot of people. Also, I want to say that everything in retrospect is in 2020. So there's things that we know now that he didn't know in the very beginning. I'm happy that there's a vaccine out there. I'm happy that people have a choice to take a vaccine. However, anything that suggests mandatory vaccination needs to be out the door. And he's been hinting towards vaccinating children or getting fines, which I'm not happy with. Recent studies are showing, like even in Massachusetts, 76% of all new COVID cases are coming from fully vaccinated people, right? So I just think we're a little hasty when it comes to putting foreign chemicals in our bodies. We only get one body, but you can always find a new job if they're telling you that you can't work there. You can always find a new place to go get your groceries if they're telling you you can't go there. But you only get one body. And so I think we should have the choice on whether we want to take a vaccine or not.
All right, Mrs. Glass-Blake, we're going to go to you. And then Dr. G, I see you're on. I'm going to ask you to opine quickly on this because I sit on 2 hospital boards. And as someone that is on the Sharp Hospital Board as well as Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, I'm watching what's happening and the people coming through the door. And so I'm going to give you a moment at the very end after Ms. Blake. Ms. Glass-Blake, what are your thoughts on how the governor has handled COVID and the shutdown?
I'm going to be really quick so I can give my time to Mr. G. But let me say this. I think we all have went back and forth and contradicted what, we have said versus what we have actually done when it came to COVID, because no one has been through this before on this magnitude, on this level. So we were all learning and figuring it out as we go. And we all made some mistakes and had to make some decisions for our family. So I just want, when we're talking about what he did, and he did a lot better than a lot of other people in leadership. And so I believe, I'm going to keep saying the word grace. We have to show grace because we were all in the same position, making different decisions. And we all could have, not made this a political issue, but really a humanitarian issue, and did what was in the best interest for all of us. But we're all trying to figure it out at the same time, particularly the Black community, who has a history of being used and misused by our medical field. And so I got an opportunity to work with Dr. G on getting over 500 people vaccinated in the last couple of events that we did. And we had to really fight to get money and funding for that, particularly in the Black community and those trusted messengers. So I want Dr. G to kind of talk about, what he's already heard and what he's seen was right and wrong in regards to how this whole thing was handled.
I agree, Dr. G. And as I mentioned, I'm going to go to you for the last word on this. As somebody who's on the sharp board, I watched the explosion of cases in the last 2 weeks, up 229%. And what are your thoughts on how this was handled?
First of all, thank you for the time, because I think it's important that we have our facts correct, first of all. And let's go back to really quickly what happened with COVID. Remind yourselves that in March, we declared this a pandemic after this virus was discovered in Wuhan back at the end, December 31st. We found a situation where I would walk into the hospital and we didn't know what to expect. In fact, there were many health officials not clear on what we should do as far as distancing, and we didn't know exactly how to manage this. But every day we would go in and more hospital beds were being filled with people with this illness. We were not even at the point where everyone was masking at the point in the hospital. And we certainly were not even close to having a vaccine. So shortly after this pandemic hit, we had the fortunate occurrence that our governor made a wise decision to shut things down. And that was done simply because, one, we had no idea of what was going on. We had very little idea of transmission rates and why it was occurring. We thought it was mainly because you would sneeze on someone and that's how you would get it. We come to find out in the months to follow, during the time that we now had time to figure this out, that indeed it was transmitted through other mechanisms, through aerosol, example, through airborne transmission. So that allowed us so that your hospital folks, such as myself, could keep doing our jobs. Because if we left things wide open, you would not have had doctors and nurses and other healthcare officials to even care for you. So he unequivocally, as the first governor to do so, did the right thing. I want to move forward to where we stand now. And that is, if you look at transmission rates, Mr. Murray, you should check your facts because they're inaccurate. The data is very clear. The people who are getting this or who are spreading this primarily are, and who are getting sick from this, gravely ill, hospitalization and death, are the people who are unvaccinated. So our focus, particularly in the minority, the African-American in particular community, the Hispanic community is doing quite well. But our communities, we have to continue to focus on what's important to minimize risk of our individuals in our communities from dying from this. So I would argue that without a doubt, Governor did the right thing in closing things down. And we are at the point now we have to double down on dealing with this through effective vaccination and masking policies. And we can talk more about this later because I don't want to exceed my time.
Thank you, Dr. G. I appreciate it. And Will Kennedy, you are the last word on this. And go ahead. What do you did the governor handle this right? And I will say this before you start. Leadership's never easy because you have to make some tough decisions. And in this instance, the question is did he make the right decisions? And did he save lives and save California? Will Kennedy, what are your thoughts?
Definitely. So I was one of the early wave of people who were infected during the COVID-19 pandemic. I was hospitalized in March of 2020. So just to highlight what Dr. G said is it's true that doctors, as they were talking me through like whether or not I was going to be intubated and all that stuff, that there was no treatment plans, there was no medicine. All they could do was treat my symptoms and and try and keep me from being intubated or passing out, or, so like there was a significant amount of uncertainty in the beginning of this pandemic. And I experienced that firsthand with doctors and nurses who were doing their best to make sure I didn't die, but who did not know what to do because the illness was so new. The governor made some quick actions in order to close the state down, in order to when we had a lack of incubators, if you remember, creating the Western States Compact that they did in order to be able to purchase more incubators for the Western states and compete on the market. When the federal government was failing to do so, was an important step that our governor and the governors of several Western states did. That was important, probably life-saving. It's also important to note, to look at, as we talk about vaccine mandates and mask mandates, the states and nations that do better and are beating COVID-19 have been beating the COVID-19 because of quarantines, because of vaccine mandates, and because of their distance. So, for example, if you look at most of the countries that have done well, they're countries with, most of them are island nations, because they are able to separate the sort of transfer of people, so they can quarantine easier because they can close off their island. So New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, those countries are doing better. Island nations are doing well because they can distance themselves from the rest of the world. So that also contradicts something I think someone said earlier, that quarantining of healthy people doesn't work, when in fact the best way to kill the illness is to do a shutdown and to increase social distancing, so you can kill the ability for the virus to pass, as far as I understand. And then also, because if it's not passing to a bunch of people, it also is less likely to mutate into a new virus, if I understand that right. And Dr. G can correct me if I'm incorrect. If everyone were to do some hard shutdown for 2 weeks, we could probably kill the virus. So the reason we're having the problem with this illness is because of the variants, and the variants are starting to show up in unvaccinated people. That's where it started first, and then it's starting to spread to vaccinated people. So when Mr. Murray was talking about the 70% of people who were vaccinated, he was speaking about a specific instance in Massachusetts where there was like a circuit party or something, where a bunch of people, 300 people were together, they all got infected, but 70% of them were vaccinated. So that did happen, but that's because there's misinformation. The vaccines don't prevent infection; they prevent your ability to go, they prevent the seriousness of the illness. So you can catch the virus. You'll likely be less symptomatic, or you'll have milder symptoms, and you likely won't go to the hospital. And that is sort of a misinformation thing that we have to combat. Just because you get the vaccine does not mean you can't get sick or you can't infect people.
Absolutely, you're right. You're absolutely right. Well, I think that's a great way to end it as we move to the next question. And I will say this as Dr. G, and I want to say this because everybody's listening. I take my hat off to you and everybody else, every other doctor and nurse and person that works in the medical field, because this has been the most difficult and unexpected 16 months of pain and agony that you had to witness every day. And you had to get up every morning and go to bed every night, knowing you had to get back up the next morning to try and address the problems that were affecting this nation, this state, this city. So this pandemic has been horrific. So we go to the next question, and it's actually the final question that I have on my list before we open it up for just open chatter. It is that because of the recall, a lot of this is also being driven by the discussion around the schools. Schools started opening up this week, and already it's all over the news. Parents concerned. I know Scott Lewis, who opened up, has asked many questions of the school district. Are you prepared? How are you handling this? There were some early concerns last year in 2020 about how the state, the school districts were handling it. I think there's a lot of concern about people weren't prepared when we arrived in the fall of 2020. Now here we are in the fall of 2021, and schools are reopening, and the anger seems to be going up. So we'll start with you, Mr. Dawson. 2 minutes, and I'm timing 2 minutes only. What are your thoughts on how the schools are handling COVID, and what is your thought on what they should be doing? And you have 2 minutes, but so you have to be concise.
I think that it's a scramble. And by that, I mean is that it's almost as if they're trying to establish policy and be willing to reevaluate the policy depending on how the prior decisions have worked. And I think, I'm not a school administrator, but I think that what one has to do is to consult the experts. people like Dr. Gillespie, people that are really very, very scientifically and medically well educated and not rely on emotion or backlash from parents. I think that science should drive the decisions on what the school administrators make. And I think that is really the primary responsibility that they have to not only educate these kids, but to protect them based on what the experts in the medical field and in the scientific field can tell them.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. All right, Mr. Murray, you've heard the question. The schools and the fear over the schools by parents who don't necessarily like how the schools are handling the reopening, don't want to have mask mandates in classrooms, and don't want to necessarily force their child to get vaccinated. How is the state and the governor handling the school situation, in your opinion?
Well, like the gentleman just said, we should be moved by science and not by our feelings. If COVID had the effects that science is saying that it does, and it's still the dangerous contagion that it is, and it's killing so many people, if that was a fact, there's no way schools would be open. I think we would be going back to online learning again for a second year in a row, which a lot of parents would not be against right now, but we don't even have a choice. I have young children, all right, and at 6 and 8 years old, children that age don't have any concept of social distancing in personal space. They show each other that they love each other by hugging and kissing and high-fiving all day. And so if COVID really was what they say it is, then I don't believe that there will be a thought of a school being open for children to go into. Also, again, if the vaccine does what people say it does, then whether the unvaccinated decides to get vaccinated or not should not affect them. The only two questions that matter to me in this matter is, does the vaccine stop you from contracting or spreading the virus? That answer is no. And if that is the case, then how does anybody use getting vaccinated as an argument for the reason why the spread would stop?
Well, I will go ahead and finish this part. Go ahead.
No, and additionally to that, the gentleman before said, it just reduces your chances of having symptoms, being hospitalized or dying. But what do we say to the people who are fully vaccinated or even just have the first dose and did get sick, hospitalized, or died?
Well, I want to interject here as a responsible Sharp Hospital board member. What science shows is that if you are fully vaccinated, the symptoms and the response, if you do indeed contract COVID, is far less. There's far less likelihood that you are going to die or be severely ill, require hospitalization. And that has been proven around the country and around the world. I think Greg Abbott himself in Texas, who has not necessarily been a gigantic COVID supporter, someone who has aligned with the conversations around the country around COVID, he himself has contracted, has tested positive for COVID, but he said the other day that he believes that the reason why his symptoms aren't as bad is because he is fully vaccinated. So let us go on to.
Actually, if I could, one last thing. If that is in fact the case, then anybody who, all right, the survivability rate of COVID is already really high. Okay, it's already really high. So if there is anything that comes in between us and COVID that reduces our chances of extreme illness or death, then that means nobody should be dying after a vaccination, considering 99% of people already are.
Well, again, I'm going to let Dr. G, and then we're going to go quickly because I want to get to the final, but I will say this, that there are a lot of people who died alone in hospitals because they weren't vaccinated. And as I said to my family, I got my first 2 doses, and I said to my family, everybody's getting theirs. I don't want anybody to die alone because you were quarantined because you came down with COVID. Dr. G, you might want to quickly respond to this to clarify.
Very quickly. I want to make a point that over 95% of the people hospitalized are unvaccinated. That's the first point. And secondly, the thing that no one talks about, and this I'm talking from a businessman's perspective, and I think Mr. Murray may understand this, is that roughly, if you look at the data from a New England Journal article that was just published, about 114 million Americans have been infected with COVID as of March of this year. We know that a conservative estimate is 10% of those will develop long haulers, so long COVID, 10 to 30% if you look at all the data. So the workforce is going to be substantially impacted by our inability to get people back to work. And many of these people are shunned because people won't believe their symptoms. And when it's a real phenomenon, I have a lot of long COVID patients. So let's not only look short-sighted as to how these things impact us. These are our number one disability in this country right now is long COVID. Don't forget that as you say this. But most importantly, job of a vaccine is to keep people out of the hospital and keep them from dying. And that is what this vaccine is doing. And I would argue a further point that we also decrease transmission rates, even though you transmit transmission rates causing severe disease in patients who are indeed vaccinated. So that's still a matter because you have a smaller percentage of people who can actually get the virus in that group of patients. Okay.
All right. All right. Thank you very much. Will Kennedy, you are up next. And Will, I want to say this before you start. Again, we're going to time you at 2 minutes, but I want to say this, that Lieutenant Governor of Texas made a comment, Dr. G, which was infuriating. And I think it's important for everybody listening today. The vaccination is designed to save lives. It's designed to help you, prevent you from becoming incredibly ill and requiring hospitalization. And yes, some people who've been fully vaccinated are coming down with it again. But the Lieutenant Governor yesterday or this week said, the reason why Texas is having so many problems is because the Black community in Texas refuses to get vaccinated. Again, the Lieutenant Governor of Texas continues to double down on comments of stupidity. But Will, you have the next question on schools and how the governor's handle it. Yes, go ahead.
Well, the problem with the school issue is that the governor has sort of waffled in between the issue. So he did the right thing in shutting down the schools and then keeping us as distance learning for a while. But then we started doing this like hybrid model. And what we are sort of seeing is that there are people who would prefer, who are nervous about their children going to school and we're seeing their schools open, who are mad about that. And then there are people who are mad about the whole issue about not having your full schooling options, right? So you have both sides of this argument he's managed to piss off by doing what is essentially the right thing. So that's sort of the thing about politics and why it's not really good in this type of situation, in that someone said that if there was a chance that that children would be spreading the disease, then we would shut down school districts. Not true, especially if you understand how government works, especially because a lot of these school districts are not controlled by the state. They have some element of local control. So if there's not a state mandate, Republican legislators or school district board members in a random school district can keep their schools open, while a Democratic-led school will keep their kids home. That just shows a lack of understanding of how school boards work. But it is important that we understand that the governor has managed to piss people off by doing the right thing, which is why politics in this particular situation is not particularly ideal.
I agree, and I will say before we go to you, Miss Glass Blake, I will say that Will, the one thing you made a comment, which is very important for people to realize, is even if the governor were recalled, the state of California, the next governor, can't just automatically force school districts to shut down or open. That is not the way that the state constitution is set up. Schools are independently controlled, and it is their decision and what they have to do. And Will, the other thing you made a comment, this is an economic issue. A lot of people can't go to work, and if they don't have a place for their kids to go to school, go to class every day, go to school every day. So works hand in hand, schools and economics. So thank you, Will. Ms. Glass Blake. You know what? Actually, I did skip. No, I did. Miss Glass Blake, I think I have you up next, and then let me see who I'm missing. But I'll let you go first, Miss Wilson.
Yes.
Miss Wilson's next, and then Miss Glass Blake. Go ahead, Miss Wilson. Miss Wilson, you're up.
I'm going to yield to the good doctor and then also the San Diego County Democratic Party chair.
All right.
I think I've already said what I needed to say.
Perfect. I appreciate it. Miss Glass Blake.
Yeah, I definitely think that Mr. Murray and Will both touched on a few key things. Unfortunately, in this situation, politics does not work in our favor. And I think one of the reasons, although the governor does not have direct control over all of the different school districts and the schools, one of the things that we do as leaders and politicians are advocacy. And one of the reasons why you don't hear a lot of advocacy about shutting back down is because we are having a recall and because this issue is political, right? And so I think if we're going to have a real conversation, we have to have the conversation about initially we were shut down, for a year, and our kids could not go to school. And so I think the biggest thing in kind of having this independent mindset of let's find the compromise, right? If we're sending our kids back to school, are we implementing all of the necessary measures to make sure they are as safe as possible? And the areas in which I believe the advocacy has taken place is around wearing masks, is around if you aren't going to get vaccinated, making sure that weekly testing takes place, making sure that we get new air filters and different resources within our schools. But I think where we have been lacking and where the governor could have done a better job is my whole job is to look at public safety issues. And the reality of it is these kids were at home in so many different conditions. We should have made sure that there were counselors and mental health specialists to deal with all of the different things that were going to coming out of a pandemic, after people have been suffering, after people have, COVID only amplified all of the deep rooted disparities and issues we already knew were there. And so we needed to make sure that we gave our kids the necessary resources to be as successful as possible. And so I see my sister went to school probably 3 weeks ago. She started school, and kids are about to start school next week. So I've seen where the issues lie in reopening. But I think it is a good compromise to have these regulations, but go back to school.
All right, wonderful. Well, I think what you all heard in this last hour of conversation is that and this is really important. COVID should be about people, not politics. Plain and simple. It should be about people, not politics. It should be about protecting people and saving lives. But today we're faced with a conversation about whether Governor Gavin Newsom has done a good job or not, and whether he should stay as governor and run for re-election next year or not. You all should have your ballots in hand by now. And they are due September 14th. And Denise Green, I want to have you provide any additional information about the ballot, because some people have said it's confusing. And as you heard, you have to fill out both or not. Do you want to give a quick rundown of that before we turn it back over to Ms. Nash for final comments and questions?
Yes, thank you. As you heard Scott mention earlier, I'll just go over a few things that I felt like was worthy of mentioning. The ballot will ask 2 questions. It asks, do you want to recall the governor? And second question is, if the governors were called, who do you want to replace them? If 50% or more vote no, the governor will remain in office. If more than 50% votes yes, the governor will be removed, and the person with the most votes will replace him. And
Ms. Green, you want to say he will be removed immediately? I think what there has been confusion is it's not like the presidential election where you have a couple of months in between inauguration. It is, you want to give the timeline?
That's a good question. I would have to get that information.
Yeah, I think that you can get back to Mrs. Nash. We'll put it out, but I believe for everybody, when the last recall happened with Governor Davis, the only delay was that Governor Schwarzenegger was filming a movie, and that delayed his entry. But there is no runway period once this happens. It is immediate. So
there's a certification period. The Secretary of State has to certify, so there will be a month period after the election. I think is the deadline for the Secretary of State to certify the election. In that month, the governor will still be the governor until the election is certified. And once it is certified, so there is going to be a 1 month runway.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, you are correct. After certification, though, there is no runway.
Right.
Once the Secretary of State has said, this is how many votes were in favor, yes, this is how many no. If indeed the governor should be recalled happens, then the Secretary of State would say, this is the person who finished the most votes. Then the transition is immediate.
And Mitch, there's one more thing that we should probably talk about, because I think that was the crux by which at least I was asked about, in terms of the second question, which we haven't really talked much about. And I think I should probably speak to it because our party has a confusing position on it.
Yes.
Will, do you mind if I just finish these few real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay. And I wanted to mention this. A question was asked about can the governor's name be written into that replacement candidate? And that answer was no. If his name is written into the write-in, it will not be counted. The certified list of acceptable write-ins will be released on September 4th, and that information can be found on the SOS website. Voters can vote yes or no on the recall and still cast a vote for a replacement candidate, or they can just simply leave it blank. And voters have the option, of course, of mailing in their ballots, which is the preferred method, but there are also drop boxes, in-person voting locations. But of course, preferred is to go ahead and mail it in. I know for San Francisco, they already have 17% of their ballots in because people are mailing them in immediately.
And the date you have to have it done by is?
September 14th.
Postmarked by September 14th.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that is correct. And every county will have an in-person early voting option, and some voting centers in the state as early as September 4th.
Okay.
And then I just want to finish by saying that you can always find accurate information on the elections on our website as well as our social media. And a very good resource is we share with people is where is our ballot. This is a way of you signing up to find out where your ballot is in the mail. You get text message and email when it's being sent to you, when it's been received. And so this is a good resource that a lot of people are using now. You can go into Google and search where is my ballot and sign up to receive those messages. And
Perfect.
that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Will, you're right, before we turn it over to Ms. Nash, you should, as the head of the party, I think you're the one person that should provide some clarity on what should we do with question number 2.
So I will admit that there is first of all, the party did not approve a position we approved a position of vote no on the recall. We did not approve a position telling people not to vote on the second question. That is a rogue message that was not authorized by the Central Committee of the California Democratic Party. Now, there are some in the because we did not endorse someone, because we did not run a candidate as we did in the last election in 2003, where we ran Lieutenant Governor Bustamante, there is no endorsed Democrat. And that is why you will see Democrats be a little bit concerned about the sort of cognitive dissonance with not filling out your whole ballot. The party tells people to vote down ballot all the time. So that was a tactic that has been pushed by political consultants because they believe that in the 2003 election, because we had no on the recall, but yes on Bustamante, we may have increased the amount of numbers for people who voted yes because they had an alternative, Cruz Bustamante. That is largely unproven. The reason we lost the recall is because Arnold Schwarzenegger had 100% name recognition, and because Governor Gray Davis was deeply unpopular. I mean, I remember I wasn't even in California. I lived in Florida, I think, at the time, and I remember the reports about the governor sending out IOUs to pay employees. There was they weren't paying people. That the state of California was in dire straits under Governor Gray Davis, and he was deeply unpopular as a governor. That is not the case with Gavin Newsom. So I think we could have afforded to have a backup measure. That being said, the current position of the Democratic Party, or the position that they're saying, is vote no. And then I would say it's not to leave the ballot bank, but the second part of the ballot is between you and whoever you believe in. Vote your conscience is probably best. But I will say that the LA Times has lost their mind for suggesting that Faulconer is the best of bad options. Faulconer is an absolute wreck. He was failing on the pandemic before failing on the pandemic was cool. He, as Aramith has already talked about how horrible of a mayor he was. The fact we do not want a Faulconer governorship. And to be honest, what will happen has happened in other states. If we lose this and there's a Republican elected, you will see a quick move by the Democratic legislature to strip the governor of all of as much of his power as possible. So. Back to the second question. The question is, vote no on the recall. That's the position of the Democratic Party. I hope you do that. I think it's best for our state. But the second question is between you and God. If you ideally a Democrat, I don't know any of them. Honestly, I'm still undecided, but it's between you and God. And if you feel like it's not right for you not to fill in the second part of the ballot, that's on you. As long as you vote no, I don't care.
All
Okay.
right. And with
Mr.
that,
Mitchell,
yes.
since I yielded my time to the last question, I wonder if you give me the honor of just bringing up 2 points that have not been brought up, that if we lose that governorship, one is going to be, we could lose a Senate majority. And it's very slim right now. And unless Dianne Feinstein steps down, I guess, before the certification, in case there's a recall, and then something happens after that, then the governor gets to pick her replacement, and that's going to have an impact in Congress. And then, of course, as an attorney, you have to think about judicial diversity. The governor is the one who appoints judgeships, and we worked really hard through, previous, I guess, governors, to include Jerry Brown and also Governor Newsom, on, who they select for the bench. And whether you are there because of a criminal case, civil, it's very important that people have judges that look like them. It doesn't mean they're going to agree with you, but at least you believe in due process, because either you solve things in the courtroom or in the street. And and then climate change, of course, with the regulations. And all we have to do is look at the weather. And I believe you were delayed because some hurricane is going up the, on the East Coast. That's supposed the first time they've had a hurricane watch, or whether you want to call it a tropical storm, in 30 years. All right, I had my say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Hello, this is Samantha Jenkins. Can I ask a question, please?
Yeah, I think what we're going to do is we're going to go into questions. Ms. Nash, let me ask Ms. Nash what she wants to do.
Let's go ahead and have the panelists summarize.
30 seconds.
Yes, first.
Let's go. Turn over questions. Okay, so I'm going to ask everybody on the panel to summarize your thoughts today, and we're going to give you 1 minute. We're going to time you so we can get to questions, because I know that there are some people who still have questions. So hang on just a minute. We will start this time. Mr. Murray, you are first up on the list. You have 30 seconds to a minute to summarize your thoughts.
All right, just to summarize what we've discussed so far today, I briefly mentioned that we need lesser, or at least not add any more new gun and ammo laws. I believe that vaccination should not be mandatory for anyone. And if it was as contagious and dangerous as we're led to believe it is by the doctors and the people in this panel, then nobody should be allowed in the school at all, because children don't care about social distancing, and they're going to pass that on to their parents every day when they come home. So I think that's my 30 seconds.
Okay, good. All right, thank you very much. Will, you're up next.
Vaccines should be mandatory unless you have a medical excuse. This virus has killed 626,000 people in less time than the Civil War, which means it's the largest killer of American lives in shorter period of time than every single war America has ever fought. Anybody who's ever served in the military should be scared about that. And then to summarize the other things, vote no on the recall. Vote your conscience on question 2, and please make sure that you follow the medical advice, whether it's vaccination, whether it's masking, or whatever. This should be about the dealing with the pandemic is about people, not politics.
Perfect. All right, Ms. Williams.
Okay, I think he just said it really comes down to getting out the vote. Please do your part, no matter how you vote. Just make sure you do it, because it's your choice, your voice, your conscience, and vote what's best for you, your family, the state, and the rest of the country. Do your part.
All right. Mr. Dawson.
I want to say that it's been widely reported that the California Democratic Statewide Party has advised people to just vote no and don't answer the second question. And so I know that Will said that's not true, but I think the party needs to make that position clear. Secondly, I think people need to understand that you cannot choose 2 candidates if you decide to answer the second question, or your vote will not count. Thirdly, thirdly, I think that we have a clear and present danger on the ballot in the form of Larry Elder. He doesn't believe that racial profiling exists. He is not in favor of transparency and accountability from the police department. He says that African Americans are prone to murder each other, and he believes that is the problem that we are having, and it is not a systemic problem with the police department. I think that we have to consider, because it is so close, meaning that only 52% of the electorate is likely to vote no if you believe what the CNN latest poll is. And only 48% are likely to vote yes on the recall. But 72% of the Republican registered voters say that they're motivated to vote, and only 61% of the Democratic voters are saying that they're motivated to vote. This is a very important election, and we have to make sure that we consider, and I'm not going to advocate the answer to the second question, but consider answering both questions, because the second question is a backup question in case the governor is unfortunately recalled.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. Appreciate it. All right, Ms. Glass-Blake, you're the last speaker, and then we will go to questions. Ms. Glass-Blake, go ahead.
The question was asked, would you vote for Trump if he ran again for president? And the Republican candidates, one stated indefinitely, yes, he would definitely run or vote for Trump. And Faulkner said he did not know. And I think from a perspective of, I'm not a Democratic pusher and I'm not a Republican pusher, I'm vote for the person who represents your values and your interests. But I believe it is dangerous for us to have a Republican in office anytime soon. And I think it is dangerous to have any governor who supports any part of Trump. And so I think when we look at who can potentially be our next governor, the only choice is Gavin Newsom. And so I normally do not tell people which way to vote, but this time today, I am asking, as probably one of the most independent people and looks at everything from that perspective, to say, vote no on the recall. And I have to go against what Will is saying in regards to putting a name there. I know you didn't go either way, Will, but I would say, let's not even give any room. Let's not give any room. Let's be very matter of fact about our decision. And then we can come back to the drawing board when we really need to talk about what the Democratic Party is doing wrong and what the Republican Party is doing wrong and what we want to move forward and want our future to look like. We can have that conversation after this recall.
Okay. With that, I want to thank all the panelists for your answers to the questions I posed. I think we're going to go to a general open question format, and my good friend Regina Evans is going to handle this part as I'm being viewed in the airport as why is he still here? So I'm going to go off camera. But Regina, can you handle answering calling on people for questions at this point?
Yes, thank you so much, Mitch. Wow, what an excellent job. Mitch is always a great delight. I think Samantha Jenkins was the first person that had a question. Samantha, you want to unmute yourself?
Actually, Regina, I really would like to go in the order. Some people have been gracious enough to text me, and I would like to give them the honor. Abina, Briscoe, yes. Stevenson, and then secondly, Lori Saldana, and then Samantha. We can go in that order. Okay.
Okay, I'll take it from there, Ellen.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, guys, and I want to thank the panelists for their time and service. And I also would just like to do a quick shout out to all you HBCU graduates. I'm a graduate of 2 HBCUs. That's to lighten the table a little bit. What I'd like to take this opportunity to do right quick is and I'm gonna take probably about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. I just want to review some of the reasons why we need to be voting no on the recall and what Gavin Newsom has stood for in the Black community. I know this is BAPAC and this is not to the exclusion of others, but we still need to understand what his governorship has meant for us. In the form of criminal, and I'm just going to touch on a high level overview. And like in the criminal justice reform, he declared a moratorium on the state's death penalty, preventing any execution in the state as long as he remained governor. He put new limits on police use of force, one of 2019's fiercest legislative battles. And he moved forward with 2 prison closures. Newsom has been flirting with the idea of closing a state prison since his inauguration. Now he's pushing ahead with that. Then I want to go to, excuse me, I'm moving through my point here. And on his, excuse me, in education, he pushed for the creation of the California College Promise, which will create partnerships between public schools, public universities, ... He passed a series of reforms at the University of California to provide student athletes with additional academic and injury-related support. And he signed into law legislation to send a record $123.9 billion to California schools. In terms of healthcare, hold on. In terms of healthcare, Gavin Newsom signed a bill aiming to address the issue of Black women dying in childbirth at disproportionate levels. In systemic racism, he signed the Crown Act into lawmaking to ensure protection against discrimination based on race-based hairstyles by extending statutory protection to hair texture protective styles such as braids, locks, twists. He signed a bill establishing a task force to study and make recommendations on reparations for slavery. That's AB 3121, the first bill of its kind in any state. In the environment, he imposed a moratorium in November 2019 on approval of new hydraulic fracturing and steam-injected oil drilling in the state. And I am going to, in the California Comeback Plan, he said 2 out of every 3 Californians should get stimulus checks, which I know some of you have received those, and over $14.5 billion to reimagine public schools and reduce class sizes focused in low-income neighborhoods. He believes in investing an additional $1.5 billion for a total of $4 billion in direct grants to California small business. And finally, and this is not finally, but just for summation for the purpose of this, I just wanted to restate and also talk about his appointments. Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, California's first Surgeon General. We know that Dr. Shirley Weber, first Black woman to serve as Secretary of State. Will Lightbourne, second Black man to serve as Director of Healthcare Services. LaKenya Jordan, first Black woman to serve as Executive Director of the California Commission on the Status of Women. Tara Lynn Gray, first Black woman to serve as Director of the Office of the Small Business Advocate. And Yolanda Richardson, first Black woman to serve as Secretary of Government Ops. Nearly 20 Black women serve in leadership appointments positioned under Governor Newsom. So he is very sensitive to and very active in terms of the issues in the Black community. And so think about those things as you go to the polls and you vote. And from a numerical perspective, when you go to the polls and vote, you vote for a candidate. You don't vote for 2 candidates. You never get to vote for a backup candidate. So if you're voting no on the recall, that means you're voting for Governor Newsom. So you can't vote for Governor Newsom and then go vote for somebody else. You either say no on the recall, that is a vote for him. And that's just my numerical and personal advice. You could do and choose whatever you want, but you don't want to cancel out your vote. You can't vote for 2 candidates in any election in the same office. So if you vote no, that's a vote for Governor Newsom. That's what I have to say. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Abina. I would also just like to add, Abina, I think you left maybe 4 key appointments off. Marty Jenkins was appointed to the California Supreme Court. And Tiina Johnson Hall is the new director of the California Housing Finance Agency. We also, I mean, the list goes on. And so I just want to make sure, LaChala also mentioned the number of African American and other judges of color that have been appointed across this state. And so just wanted to add those additional appointments. Well stated. And we thank the California Black Women Collective for their leadership in this space. And I know you are messaging their agenda. So thank you so very much.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.
Ms. Saldana, good to see you, Speaker Pro Tem.
Thank you. Well, and thank you for everyone who has made such important comments about the good work that the governor has been doing. I was a state employee and teaching at the community college a year ago when we did the shutdown. Our chancellor basically did an emergency shutdown, and within 24 hours, we were out of that classroom. And I think it saved lives. In fact, I know it did, because if we hadn't acted, from the governor down to our chancellor's office, if we hadn't acted that quickly, we would have lost a lot more people to COVID very early on. So I wanted to speak briefly about the impact of having served under Schwarzenegger, how disruptive it was to have someone who had no prior statewide experience. He wouldn't even meet with us as legislators. He didn't see us as equals. It was extremely disruptive to the state. He tried to do, you'll probably remember this, we had years of back-to-back-to-back special elections because he couldn't get his initiatives through the legislature. So he tried to push them through with special elections and ballot measures. And that's exactly the pattern we're starting to go into now. So as I speak to people and I explain, just having worked as a legislator at the time of having a governor who was not experienced, who didn't understand the political process, who came from a business background. And a lot of people I spoke to before the election, the recall election, said, well, he has to be smart. He's a millionaire, he's a businessman, but that's not how government works. And we lost years of progressive policies under that governor. So I really, as you're talking with people and people may say, well, what about this? What about that? Please emphasize just how much we lost under the last recall and how disruptive it was and how expensive to the state it was. And we all do better when we have experienced, qualified people who understand policy and working collaboratively with others. And I don't see any alternative that will be able to do that. And I'll finally just say, I ran against Kevin Faulconer for mayor to take away the opportunity for him to say, I did such a good job in a Democratic city that no one even ran against me. And, I really wanted to make sure that he didn't have the opportunity to say that. I ran as an independent, still got a lot of support. And I think it's important that we emphasize, even in San Diego, he really failed. He really failed communities of color, unsheltered communities. And we need to emphasize, we just can't risk having that lack of leadership ascend to the state level. Thank you, everybody. And thanks again for some really important on-point comments about why we need to keep this governor in office.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining today. Samantha Jenkins.
I just wanted to say thank you to the panel for the robust conversation and the perspectives that were presented today. And I wanted to ask a very brief question to the Secretary of State's office representative, Ms. Green. She spoke about the Track My Ballot tool that can be used once you mail in your ballot. And my only question was, is that something that you have to do with every election cycle, or is it once you've signed up for that, it will always be accessible to you?
No, once you have signed up, you are signed up.
All right, thank you. That's the extent of my question.
You're welcome.
On mute.
Thank you, Samantha. Other questions?
Okay, wait. I just want to piggyback on what Ms. Saldana said, because I actually had that written down, with the fact that we have 41 candidates, none of them have been vetted. And I only recognize a couple of names. One of the people, I mean, they lost last time in a landslide, and they think they're going to get another chance. I'm not going to mention by name. And my question is, how are you going to allow these people to take over our state, which is the most populous in the United States? And if I'm, incorrect, I can be corrected. The 8th largest economy in the whole world. Oh, 5th. Okay, the 5th largest. I know one time 8th, or maybe I'm mixing up numbers. But the thing is, what type of leadership skills do these people have? And I think that's what you touched on. Do they have any government experience? Do, run an executive office? How they structure their cabinet in such a short period of time between now and next November? And we don't have time for someone to learn on the job. You've got to remember, the governorship or the governor's office is not a reality TV show. It is not an apprentice position. There's just too much at stake. Because, if you really want to look at it, if I had a little bit of extra cash, I could have put my name on the ballot, and then later on when I ran for something or applied for a job, they go to say, what's your background? Well, I was a gubernatorial candidate. And that's all I wanted to add, but I don't understand how these people think they can be governor, and maybe I just don't have enough confidence in myself, and maybe I should have ran, but I tell you what, I would have polled ahead of some of them. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you, LaChala. Any other questions? Before I turn the mic back over to our chair, Ellen Nash, I'm going to ask maybe two of the panelists, Mr. Will Rodriguez Kennedy and Mr. Michael Murray. What's at stake in this election, and what is the call to action? What is at stake? Mr. Kennedy and then Mr. Murray.
Everything is at stake. We have made once in a generation lifetime generation investments in families. We have a surplus election budget. We have made investments in housing and homelessness. We have made advances in civil rights and worker rights. We have healthcare opportunities that most states do not have. Our economy is the 5th largest in the world, between Germany and the United Kingdom. All of that, and all of our progress comes to a complete and crashing halt if we put a political extremist or at worst, or an inexperienced person in the governor's office. You would lead to a situation of political and economic instability, where the legislature and now will have to contend with a powerful executive who has the ability to truly mess up and gut the California departments. The governor has a significant amount of appointment power, from deputies, from secretaries to certain governments, to certain departments, to senior management, like directors of certain departments. Those directors could then fire and mid-level directors. It could gut the civil service. We could literally, a bad governor could gut the state of California in ways that are disastrous to all of us, and particularly the people who will suffer the most are people of color, the Black community, the Latinx community, women who have made such advancements in terms of voting rights and civil rights and all that stuff. We will shoulder the burden of this decision if we allow one of these extremists to be elected to governor. So everything is at stake, and God forbid if Dianne Feinstein retires, or if her health gives out or something, we could hand the national majority to the Republican Party, the same Republican Party that basically, I don't even want to get into that, but it is a nightmare scenario to lose this recall. And so it is absolutely important that we vote no.
Thank you. Mr. Murray?
Yeah, I have to agree with Mr. Rodriguez Kennedy. A bad governor could be detrimental to the state of California, and for all of the reasons that he said and then some. The sanctity and protections that our Constitution provides to us is definitely threatened if we have somebody inexperienced or extreme in any direction, Democrat or Republican. And also our public safety stands to fall, which is why I speak so much about gun laws. At the end of the day, a law is a law, and criminals don't care about the law. So the more restrictions we put on our right to bear arms and protect our families, the more restrictions we're only putting on law-abiding citizens who pay their taxes and want to follow the rules, not the people who don't care about that. Anytime we talk about mandatory anything, it takes away your right to choose for yourself and for your family. And when I enlisted into the Marine Corps, I took an oath to defend the Constitution from threats foreign and domestic. And so I'm not going to sit back and just because of fear of the unknown, say that anything should be mandated on my family. So there is a lot at stake. There is a lot to lose, which is why we have to make sure we're thinking coherently, clearly, and logically, and not based on fear or the fear of what we don't know and don't understand. Listen to the scientists, pay attention to the doctors, and learn about governmental process. So we're not voting for somebody just because we like how they look and because they say they're for Black people. Because at the end of the day, historically, tons of politicians throughout the years have said that they were here to do something for us, and it's not for us. There is no law today that stops a Black person from doing anything that we want to do. And we have to understand that before we listen to another politician tell us about how disenfranchised we are, how much we need them to have a good life. Make your vote based on what protects your pockets, what protects your community, your family, and your children, and nothing else.
Thank you. Thank you very much. To all the panelists, to all the listeners, participants on Facebook Live, on YouTube, on this Zoom call, just thank you so much. I think the charge and call to action to each and every one of us is to make sure that we tell everyone about September 14th. They must exercise their right to vote. Family members, friends, church members, you know your network. Reach out, encourage everyone to cast that vote. To BAPAC, Ellen, thank you always for your amazing leadership, your timely conversations, and thank you for being here. And we'll turn this over to none other than Miss Ellen Nash. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Regina. And thank you, Mitch Mitchell, for running an amazing, informative forum. Thank you, panelists. We want to end right at 2:00, but I would like Dr. Gillespie, to have the last word.
Thank you, Ellen. I think much has been said. I just want to make certain that we're all clear that our children typically don't get COVID from each other. Our children get COVID from us. So if we are doing the right things, we're much more likely to have success within our schools, and that is through vaccination. And we have to continue to understand that we have to do, only way out of this pandemic is through that. And as far as the data, you know, we're now up to almost 400 million shots that have been given in the United States. We know that vaccines, when they're a problem, we typically know within the first 3 months. We're well beyond that time frame. I'm personally a participant in the Moderna trial. I want all of us to hone in on what is going to make a difference for us. I want to also leave you with this point. The original virus had a row. And when I say a row, that means the individual who gets infected would typically infect on average of about 2.5 people. With the Delta variant, one person getting infected, and it's 5 to 8 people. And this is a mostly asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic disease. You don't even know you have it and you're giving it to people. How many people I have seen that have died and killed their unwittingly took this to their parents' homes when they were isolated prior to vaccines. So we have to keep in mind this Delta variant and many variants to come is dangerous. And as earlier mentioned, if we want to get out of this, we have to keep variants from occurring. And the only way we can do that is through following the guidelines. Let's not make this political. Let's make this what's about keeping us healthy as a society. And I want to thank all of you for allowing me to participate.
Thank you, Dr. G. And with that said, I want to thank you. I love you all. Let's make some good choices. And we'll see you next time. God bless.